The fluorescent lights of Seattle Children's Hospital had become achingly familiar to Claire Bennett over the past 6 months. She sat in the sterile waiting room, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Through the window, she could see the rain painting gray streaks down the glass, mirroring the tears she refused to let fall. Inside room 412, her 7-year-old son Oliver lay sleeping, his small chest rising and falling with the help of machines that beeped in a rhythm she had memorized. Dr. Rachel Morrison had been gentle when she delivered the news that morning. Oliver's congenital heart defect had worsened beyond what medication could manage. He needed surgery, a complex procedure that would require a specialized team and equipment available at only 3 hospitals in the country. The cost was staggering, $320,000, and her insurance would cover barely a third of it. Claire had listened to every word, nodding as if she understood, as if the number had not just shattered every plan she had for saving her son's life. She had been working at Sterling Tech for only 3 months, hired as a senior graphic designer after years of freelancing from her tiny apartment. The job had felt like a miracle when she received the offer, a steady paycheck with benefits, and the chance to finally give Oliver some stability. But now that stability felt like sand slipping through her fingers. She had already sold her car, borrowed from every friend who would listen, and set up crowdfunding pages that raised a fraction of what she needed. Time was running out, and with each day that passed, Oliver grew weaker. The glass tower Sterling Tech occupied 15 floors of a gleaming tower in downtown Seattle, all glass and steel and the kind of modern minimalism that whispered wealth. Claire had felt out of place on her first day, surrounded by people in designer clothes who spoke in acronyms and moved with the confidence of those who had never worried about money. But she had kept her head down, focused on her work, and tried to ignore the rumors that swirled through the office about Nathan Sterling, the young CEO who had built the company from nothing and now ruled it with an iron will. She had seen him only twice before the day she decided to ask for help. Once in the elevator, where he had stood in silence, his eyes fixed on his phone, radiating an intensity that made the air feel charged. And once in a company meeting, where he had dissected a marketing campaign with surgical precision, leaving the senior team scrambling to revise their strategy. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that was always perfectly styled and eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they saw. Claire knew asking him for an advance was probably pointless. She had no leverage, no history with the company, nothing to offer except her desperation. But she had run out of options, and desperation made people brave in ways they never imagined. So she sent an email requesting a private meeting, her hands shaking as she pressed send. The office meeting, Nathan's office, was on the top floor, with windows that offered a panoramic view of the city and the gray waters of Puget Sound beyond. Claire stood in front of his desk, her portfolio clutched in her hands like a shield, and tried to remember the speech she had practiced. Nathan sat behind a desk made of dark wood and chrome, his posture relaxed, but his attention focused entirely on her. She explained the situation as calmly as she could, keeping her voice steady even as her heart hammered in her chest. Oliver's condition, the surgery he needed, the impossible cost. She showed him her work, the projects she had completed ahead of schedule, the client feedback that praised her creativity and dedication. She asked for an advance of $200,000 to be paid back over 5 years with interest. She promised she would work harder than anyone else in the company, take on any project, meet any deadline. When she finished, there was a long silence. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin, and studied her with an expression she could not read. Finally he spoke, his voice cool and measured. "You have been here 3 months. You are asking me to front you more money than most people see in a decade. Why should I take that risk?" Claire felt something crack inside her, the careful composure she had built threatening to shatter. "Because I am a good employee. Because I will work myself to the bone to pay you back. Because my son will die if I do not find a way to pay for this surgery." Nathan stood and walked to the window, his hands in his pockets, his back to her. The silence stretched out, filled only by the muted sounds of the city below. When he turned back, there was something different in his expression, something that made her stomach twist with unease. "I could give you the money, But I do not do charity, Claire. Everything in business is a transaction. She waited, her breath caught in her throat as he walked closer. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes, close enough that she had to tilt her head up to meet his gaze. One night. You spend one night with me, and I will transfer the full amount to your account by morning. No contract, no strings beyond that. You walk away with what you need, and we never speak of it again. The impossible decision. Claire felt the room tilt, her vision blurring at the edges. She wanted to slap him, to throw her portfolio in his face and storm out. She wanted to scream that she was not that kind of person, that he had no right to make such a proposal. But the words died in her throat, replaced by the image of Oliver in his hospital bed, his small hand in hers as he asked when he could go home and play soccer again. She heard herself ask him to repeat it, needing to be sure she had understood correctly. Nathan did, his tone as calm as if he were discussing a business merger. He named a hotel, a time, told her to wear whatever made her feel comfortable. Then he returned to his desk and picked up his phone, dismissing her without another word. Claire walked out of his office on shaking legs, made it to the bathroom before the tears came. She leaned against the sink and stared at her reflection, seeing a woman she barely recognized. Every fiber of her being screamed that this was wrong, that there had to be another way. But as the hours ticked by and she sat beside Oliver's bed that evening, watching him sleep with tubes running from his small arms, she knew the truth. There was no other way, not in time. That night, she texted Nathan a single word. Yes. His response came within seconds. Grand Hyatt, Suite 1805, tomorrow at 8 p.m. The night that changed everything. Claire borrowed a dress from Sophie, a simple black sheath that fit well enough. She told her friend she had a work dinner, hating the ease with which the lie came. Sophie had hugged her and told her she was doing an amazing job holding everything together. And Claire had smiled and nodded, feeling like a fraud. The hotel lobby was all marble and soft lighting, filled with people who belonged in places like this. Claire kept her head down as she walked to the elevator, her heels clicking against the polished floor. In the elevator, she watched the numbers climb, each floor bringing her closer to a decision she could never take back. Nathan opened the door on the first knock. He had changed from his suit into dark jeans and a white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then he stepped aside, and she walked in. The suite was elegant and impersonal, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city lights. A bottle of wine sat on the table, 2 glasses beside it. Nathan offered her one, and she shook her head, her voice quiet but firm when she said she wanted to keep this as brief as possible. Something flickered across his face, too quick for her to name. He set the glass down and crossed the room to stand near the window, giving her space. They stood in silence for a long moment, and Claire realized he seemed almost uncertain, as if he had not expected her to actually come. When he finally approached her, his movements were slow, careful. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, and she forced herself not to flinch. She closed her eyes and let it happen, focusing on the image of Oliver smiling, Oliver running, Oliver alive and well and whole. It was over before dawn. Claire dressed in the dim light while Nathan slept or pretended to. On the table, she found an envelope with her name written in his sharp, precise handwriting. Inside was a cashier's check for $320,000, the full amount. She stared at it for a long moment, then slipped it into her purse and left without looking back. By noon, she was at the hospital, handing the check to Dr. Morrison. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. Oliver would have his chance. The weeks following Oliver's surgery passed in a blur of hospital visits and sleepless nights. The procedure had been successful, and Dr. Morrison reported that his recovery was progressing better than expected. Claire spent every moment she could at his bedside, reading him stories and helping him with the puzzles that kept his mind busy during the long hours of healing. When she returned to work, she wore her professional mask like armor, determined to prove that nothing had changed, but everything had changed. Claire could feel it in the way her heart raced whenever she heard Nathan's voice in the hallway, in the way she planned her route through the office to avoid crossing his path. She kept her head down during meetings, spoke only when directly addressed, and left the building the moment her shift ended. She became a ghost in the glass tower, present but untouchable. Nathan noticed. Of course he noticed. In meetings, she could feel his gaze on her, heavy and searching. He began asking for her input on projects, pulling her into discussions that should have been handled by senior staff. At first, she thought he was testing her, waiting for her to crack under the weight of what had happened between them. But as the days passed, she realized his attention felt different. There was no smugness in his expression, no arrogance, just something that looked almost like curiosity. The unexpected kindness. 3 weeks after Oliver's surgery, Claire arrived at work to find a package on her desk. Inside was a tablet, top of the line, with a note in Nathan's handwriting. For your son's recovery, educational games are already installed. There was no signature, no demand for acknowledgement. Just the gift and the simple message. Claire stared at it for a long time, her throat tight. She wanted to return it, to refuse anything that might suggest she owed him more than she had already given. But she thought of Oliver, bored and restless in his hospital bed, and she knew she could not take this away from him. That evening, when she gave him the tablet, his face lit up with a joy she had not seen in months. He hugged her tight and asked if she had saved up for it, and she told him a friend from work had helped. It was not entirely a lie. The following week, Nathan invited her to join a presentation to a potential client, a tech startup looking for a complete brand overhaul. Claire tried to decline, suggesting that someone more senior would be better suited, but Nathan insisted. His tone left no room for argument, so she prepared her materials and told herself it was just work, nothing more. The meeting took place in a sleek conference room with walls made of frosted glass. The client was young and demanding, with ideas that changed every few minutes. Claire watched as Nathan handled him with practiced ease, redirecting the conversation whenever it veered off course. When it was her turn to present, she laid out 3 design concepts, each tailored to different aspects of the startup's vision. She spoke clearly and confidently, her nervousness buried beneath years of practice. When she finished, the client leaned back in his chair and smiled. That is exactly what we have been looking for. Nathan glanced at her, and for a brief moment she saw something like approval in his eyes. After the client left, Nathan turned to her and said simply, "Well done." Then he walked away, leaving her standing there with a strange mix of pride and confusion. The Portland trip, the business trip, came without warning. Nathan called her into his office on a Thursday afternoon and informed her that they would be flying to Portland the next morning to meet with a major investor. The meeting was critical, and he wanted her there to present the visual concepts for a new product line. Claire opened her mouth to protest, to say that she needed to stay close to Oliver, but Nathan cut her off. "Your son is recovering well. I checked with the hospital. You will be back by evening. Bring your portfolio." The fact that he had checked on Oliver left her speechless. She wanted to ask how he knew which hospital, how he had gotten information about her son, but the words would not come. She simply nodded and left his office, her mind racing. The flight was short, barely an hour in the air. They sat across from each other in first class, Nathan working on his laptop while Claire reviewed her notes. The silence between them was heavy but not uncomfortable. When the plane hit turbulence, Claire gripped the armrest, her knuckles white. Nathan looked up from his screen and, without a word, handed her a bottle of water. The gesture was small, but it made something inside her chest ache. The meeting in Portland went smoothly. The investor was impressed by the designs Claire had created, and by the time they left the office, Nathan had secured the funding he needed. As they walked back to the car, a sudden rainstorm erupted, drenching the streets in seconds. They took shelter under the awning of a coffee shop, standing close enough that Claire could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Nathan looked down at her, rain dripping from his hair, and smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him, unguarded and genuine. For a moment, they were not CEO and employee, not the man who had made an impossible proposal and the woman who had accepted it. They were just two people caught in the rain, sharing a moment that felt almost normal. The breaking point back in Seattle, Claire found herself thinking about that smile more than she wanted to admit. She told herself it meant nothing, that she was reading too much into small gestures and fleeting moments. But Nathan continued to find reasons to involve her in high-profile projects, to ask for her opinion during strategy sessions, to linger near her desk with questions that could have been sent via email. One evening, as most of the office had emptied out, Nathan appeared at her workspace. Claire looked up from her computer, her heart skipping a beat. He leaned against the edge of her desk, his tie loosened, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "How is Oliver doing?" The question caught her off guard. "Fine. He is getting stronger every day." Nathan nodded, his gaze steady. "I am glad." He paused, then added, "You are a good mother, Claire. What you did for him took courage." Claire felt her defenses crack, just a little. It did not feel like courage. It felt like survival. Sometimes those are the same thing. They stood in silence for a moment, the office around them quiet except for the hum of computers and the distant sound of traffic below. Claire wanted to say something, to acknowledge the kindness he had shown in recent weeks, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead, she simply looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the calculating businessman who had made her an offer she could not refuse, but a man who seemed genuinely interested in her life beyond the transaction they had made. Nathan straightened and moved toward the elevator, then stopped and turned back. "For what it is worth, I respect you more than anyone else in this building, not because of what happened, but in spite of it. You show up every day and do exceptional work, even when I know you are carrying weight that would break most people." Then he was gone, leaving Claire alone with thoughts that refused to settle. The photograph, the shift between them became impossible to ignore. During a site visit to a new office location, they found themselves alone in an empty conference room, reviewing floor plans. Nathan pointed out a feature in the design, and Claire leaned in to see, their shoulders touching. Neither moved away. The contact lasted only seconds, but it left Claire's skin tingling. Later that week, Oliver was finally discharged from the hospital. Claire brought him home to their small apartment, which Sophie had decorated with welcome home banners and balloons. That night, as Oliver slept in his own bed for the first time in months, Claire sat at her kitchen table and allowed herself to cry. The relief, the exhaustion, the weight of everything she had carried for so long, it all came pouring out. The next morning, she brought a photo to work and placed it on her desk. It showed Oliver in the hospital, grinning at the camera with the tablet in his hands. She had hidden every trace of her personal life since starting at Sterling Tech, but something had shifted. She no longer wanted to pretend that part of her life did not exist. When Nathan passed her desk later that day, he paused, his eyes on the photograph. "That him?" Claire nodded. "That is Oliver. He looks like a fighter. He is." She met his gaze, and for the first time since that night in the hotel, she did not look away. "He gets it from his mother, I think." Nathan smiled, that same unguarded expression she had seen in the rain. "I have no doubt." As he walked away, Claire realized that somewhere between the desperation and the shame, between the transaction and the recovery, something unexpected had taken root. She did not know what to call it, and she was not sure she wanted to. But it was there, growing in the spaces between their conversations, in the moments when their eyes met across a conference room, in the quiet acknowledgement that they had both misjudged each other and were now seeing something different, something that scared her almost as much as the choice she had made in his office all those weeks ago. The envelope arrived on Nathan's desk on a Tuesday morning, embossed with gold lettering that announced the annual Children's Hospital Foundation Gala. James Hartley, his business partner and closest friend, had been pushing him to attend for weeks. The foundation supported pediatric cardiac care, and James sat on their board of directors. Nathan normally avoided these events, finding them tedious and overly sentimental, but James had been persistent. "You need to show your face, Nathan. Good publicity for the company, and the cause is worth it. Just 2 hours, then you can leave." Nathan had agreed more to end the conversation than out of genuine interest. Now, as the evening of the gala approached, he found himself distracted at work, his mind wandering during meetings. He told himself it was stress, the pressure of upcoming product launches and investor demands. But he knew the truth. He could not stop thinking about Claire. Their interactions had become the highlight of his days. The way she challenged his ideas in strategy meetings, never backing down even when others deferred to him. The rare moments when she laughed at something someone said, her whole face transforming with genuine joy. The quiet strength she carried, visible in every gesture and word. He had started looking for excuses to be near her, to hear her voice, to catch glimpses of the life she guarded so carefully. The ballroom discovery. The gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, all crystal chandeliers and champagne fountains. Nathan arrived fashionably late, his tuxedo perfectly tailored, his expression neutral. He made the rounds, shaking hands with board members and donors, offering polite conversation that required no real thought. James found him near the silent auction tables and handed him a glass of wine. "See? Not so terrible. You might even enjoy yourself." Nathan doubted it, but he smiled and moved toward the back of the room where he could observe without being drawn into lengthy conversations. The program began with speeches from doctors and administrators, each sharing stories of children whose lives had been saved by the foundation's work. Nathan listened with half his attention, his gaze drifting across the crowd. Then the MC, a cheerful woman in a red dress, began telling a story that made Nathan's blood run cold. She spoke of a 7-year-old boy named Oliver who had been diagnosed with a severe congenital heart defect. The surgery he needed was expensive and complicated, and his mother had struggled to raise the funds in time. Thanks to a last-minute donation that arrived just days before the procedure, Oliver had received his surgery and was now recovering beautifully. Nathan's heart began to pound. The name, the timing, the details, they all aligned with fragments of conversations he had overheard Claire having on the phone, with the careful way she spoke about her son's health. He scanned the room more urgently now, looking for confirmation that he was wrong, that this was just a coincidence. The MC gestured toward the volunteer registration table near the entrance. "Oliver's mother is here tonight, volunteering her time to help other families facing similar challenges. Please join me in thanking all our volunteers for their dedication." Nathan followed the gesture, his eyes landing on a figure in a navy dress standing behind the table. Even from across the room, he recognized the curve of her shoulders, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. Claire looked up at the applause, offering a small smile to the crowd before returning her attention to the clipboard in her hands. The pieces fall together. The realization hit Nathan like a physical blow. The hotel room, the envelope filled with cash, her desperation when she had come to his office. She had not been asking for herself. She had been asking for Oliver, her son, the child whose photo now sat on her desk, whose recovery she had fought for with every ounce of strength she possessed. Nathan's chest tightened as the full weight of his actions crashed over him. He had seen her as just another person trying to use him, another transaction in a life built on deals and negotiations. He had offered her something degrading because he had assumed she was motivated by greed or ambition. But she had been a mother trying to save her dying child, and he had made her trade her dignity for his help. He moved through the crowd without thinking, driven by a need to reach her, to say something, anything that might undo the harm he had caused. But Claire spotted him before he made it halfway across the room. Her eyes widened, her face draining of color. She said something to the woman beside her at the table, then slipped away through a side door. Nathan followed, his pulse racing. He found her in a quiet corridor lined with art and empty coat check stations, her back pressed against the wall as if she needed the support to stay upright. When she saw him, she straightened, her chin lifting in defiance even as her hands trembled. The confrontation. "Why did you not tell me?" Nathan's voice came out rougher than he intended, raw with emotions he did not know how to name. Claire's laugh was bitter. "Tell you what? That I had a sick child? You made it very clear what kind of company Sterling Tech is. No room for people with outside obligations. No tolerance for anything that might distract from the bottom line. I needed that job, Nathan. I needed the insurance and the paycheck, and I could not risk losing it. That is not what I meant. Why did you not tell me what the money was for? Her eyes flashed with anger. Would it have made a difference? Would you have just handed me the money out of the goodness of your heart? Nathan flinched. The truth was, he did not know. The man he had been 8 weeks ago might not have. But the man standing here now, who had watched Claire work herself to exhaustion while hiding her fear, who had seen her dedication and strength, that man wished desperately that she had given him the chance to be better. I would like to think I would have found another way to help. Something that did not require you to give up so much. Claire's expression hardened. You did not offer another way. You offered a transaction and I accepted. We both got what we wanted. You got your night and I got my son's life. The math is simple. It should not have been that simple. Nathan took a step closer, his voice dropping. I was wrong, Claire, about everything. I thought you were like the others. The people who see me as a means to an end. But you are not. You never were. The truth laid bare. Claire wrapped her arms around herself, a protective gesture that made Nathan ache. What do you want from me, Nathan? An absolution? Permission to feel better about what happened? I want you to know that I see you now, really see you, not as an employee or a transaction, but as someone extraordinary. Someone who loves her son enough to do the impossible? Someone who shows up every day and does brilliant work even when carrying grief I cannot imagine. I was blind before, but I am not anymore. Tears gathered in Claire's eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. Seeing me does not change what happened. It does not erase the fact that I stood in that hotel room feeling like I was selling pieces of myself to save my child. Do you know what that does to a person? Do you have any idea what it feels like to look in the mirror and not recognize yourself? Nathan felt something crack open in his chest. No, I do not. But I know what it feels like to realize you have hurt someone who did not deserve it. Someone you have come to care about more than you thought possible. The admission hung between them, stark and vulnerable. Claire stared at him, her expression shifting from anger to confusion to something softer that she tried to hide. Nathan continued, the words flowing now that he had started. These past weeks, watching you, working with you, I have seen strength and grace that humbles me. You make me want to be better than I am. You make me question every assumption I have built my life on. And I know I have no right to ask for anything from you, not after what I did. But I need you to know that you are not what I thought. You are so much more. The beginning of something new. Claire closed her eyes, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. She wiped them away with angry gestures, but more followed. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I did not want you to know about Oliver because I did not want your pity. I did not want anyone at that company to see me as weak or compromised. I wanted to be just Claire, the designer who was good at her job. Not Claire, the desperate mother who would do anything to save her son. You are both, and neither one makes you weak. Nathan resisted the urge to reach for her, knowing she needed space. The strongest person I know is standing in front of me right now. They stood in the corridor for a long moment, the sounds of the gala muffled by distance and closed doors. Finally, Claire opened her eyes and looked at him directly, her gaze searching his face for something she could not name. I do not know how to move forward from this. I do not know if we can. Nathan nodded slowly. I do not know either, but I would like to try. Not as your boss making demands, not as someone who holds power over you, just as someone who wants to know you better, if you will let me. Claire's laugh was shaky but genuine. You are still my boss. That part has not changed. Then I will do everything in my power to make sure you never feel pressured or uncomfortable. Your job is secure regardless of what happens between us, Claire. That is a promise. She studied him for a long moment, weighing his words against everything that had happened. Finally, she nodded, just a small dip of her head. Okay, but we go slow. And if I say stop, we stop. Agreed. They walked back to the ballroom together, maintaining a careful distance. But something fundamental had shifted. The wall between them had not come down completely, but cracks had formed, letting light through. As Claire returned to the volunteer table and Nathan rejoined James near the bar, both carried the weight of what had been said and the fragile hope of what might still be possible. James leaned over and whispered, "You look like you have seen a ghost." Nathan kept his eyes on Claire across the room, watching as she smiled at a family checking in for the event. "Not a ghost. Just the future, maybe, if I do not mess it up." James followed his gaze and raised his eyebrows, but said nothing. Some things did not need explanation. Some things just needed time to unfold. And for the first time in his carefully controlled life, Nathan Sterling was willing to wait. The end.